who are denied access to in-person education. We still have businesses closed in many parts of this country, and we have millions and millions of lives destroyed. Those lockdowns have not worked. They've done great damage to our country. We can never let something like this happen again. Florida took a different path. We've had more success as a result. And you see that, of course, in the unemployment figures. We're at 4.8%. You have a lot of these lockdown states that are 8 or 9% unemployment. And even though you look during this most recent period, and they have higher incidence of COVID per capita in places like New York and California over November, December, January period than the state of Florida does. So the policies have not been effective. Florida's policies have been more effective. And yet, with the advent of the federal stimulus bill, we are getting comparatively less money than our population because our unemployment is lower, and a lot of those states that have much higher unemployment are getting much billions and billions of dollars more. I've been on record about saying I don't think that that's fair. Nevertheless, it is what it is, and we have a responsibility to take a look at what Florida may be getting, and I am today going to be sending a letter to the Speaker and the Senate President outlining some of my recommendations about how some of the state funds can be used as part of this most recent stimulus. My recommendations today, we don't know exactly how much money we're going to get. We're going to wait on some guidance. It is tied to unemployment. We think it's between $9 and $10 billion. My recommendations today outline expenditures totaling just $4.1 billion. I know the legislature is going to have a role. I've spoken with both the Senate President and the Speaker. I know they have different ideas, but I think most of what I'll outline today, there'll be broad agreement between both chambers as well as my office. So we propose the recommendations for this portion of it as follows. We know that the pandemic put an awful lot of strain on our first responders, EMTs, sworn law enforcement, firefighters, and so we believe that we should recognize their sacrifice over the last year. So I'm proposing a one-time $1,000 bonus payment to all first responders, fire, sworn law enforcement, EMTs, which totals about $208.4 million. It'll be administered by DEO in partnership with other state agencies, and we want to fund this in this current fiscal year so we can get those payments out as quickly as possible. We also understand there's need to address some of the infrastructure in our own agencies, including the Connect reemployment system. There was recently a report, as many of you know, recommending money to modernize it. So I'm recommending $73.2 million to modernize the Connect reemployment assistance program consistent with those findings. I'm also recommending the provision of $56.6 million to support the operations of the reemployment assistance program to accommodate increased volume and manage the adjudication of claims, particularly when you have disputed claims. An important initiative in my administration and one that the First Lady has worked tirelessly around is the coordination and streamlining of behavioral health services. One of the tragic effects of the pandemic is that mental health is the toll on mental health, social isolation, and the stresses of economic uncertainty have exacerbated the need for services throughout our health system, although I will say we've mitigated it much better than some of the lockdown states. But that's why I've included a recommendation of $72 million for the creation of a comprehensive behavioral health management system. This funding would provide for the development of an integrated behavioral health data management system that will streamline access to behavioral health services. The system will have the capability of identifying each individual who's receiving services across multiple systems of care and better integrate those individuals into the services provided across programs and ultimately multiple departments. We want to break down the silos as best we can. We also propose to use some of the resources to help economic development and economic recovery. One of the areas of Florida that's been hardest hit throughout the pandemic has been our seaports. We have 4.8% unemployment. Our cruise ships are under a no sail order from the CDC. I've wanted them to start sailing long ago. I think they should be able to sail, and we want to see them sail. But nevertheless, that's taken an enormous amount of toll on our seaports, and yet in all these different relief packages, there hasn't been any money set aside for any of the seaports. And so we're recommending almost $260 million in relief for our seaports. That is an amount equal to the losses they've accrued during the pandemic through February of 2021. And obviously, they still will be incurring potentially more losses, but we hope that they're able to get everything operating 100% very soon. We also, as you remember, as part of the budget, I had to make a lot of tough decisions. We were in a time of uncertainty. We didn't know what the revenue would look like, what the jobs would look like months down the road. So I vetoed $1 billion, including some of my own initiatives like the Job Growth Grant Fund. We are, of course, asking for money as part of the normal budget for Job Growth Grant Fund, but I'm also, as part of the supplemental, requesting an additional $150 million for the Florida Job Growth Grant Fund. We believe there'll be ways to apply this to help with workforce skills, as well as infrastructure investments in key areas. And I think it'll be really, really good. So that'll be in addition to what we requested in our normal budget. And the same goes for Visit Florida. We put money in the budget for that. I think we see that there's going to be a need to do it. Now, our hospitality industry has been hit very hard, although they've been able to weather it better than I think initially forecasted, largely because we've been open for business and parts of the state have done very well. Other parts have struggled and are doing better, but are still not close to where they were. So we're recommending an additional $50 million to support Visit Florida operations and marketing efforts. I think that with the advent of these vaccines, you're already seeing people feel really good about traveling again, about doing some of this stuff. There's a lot of pent-up demand, we believe. We think there's a lot of money on the sidelines for people who haven't been doing some of the things they would normally be doing. And we obviously want Florida to be the beneficiary of that when people start getting back into the mix on enjoying themselves, on traveling, on visiting places. And so this will be $50 million on top of what I already requested in the budget. And we think, given the circumstances and given the effects on our tourism industry that the last year has seen, that that's entirely appropriate. We're also recommending $50 million for the road fund. This road fund allows the DOT to work with Enterprise Florida and local governments in addressing transportation infrastructure problems which may adversely affect the decision of employers to locate, expand, or remain in the state of Florida. Funding will bring back the program as one of the state's economic programs used to recruit new business and expand current businesses throughout Florida. So with combining my budget request, this would be $50 million on top of that for a total of $100 million. We also want to invest in our underlying infrastructure, resiliency, readiness. One of the big components of my initial budget was our Resilient Florida program. And my recommendation today builds off that recommendation, and we are asking for another $1 billion for the Resilient Florida grant program in year one alone. This funding will build on the initial recommendation, enabling the Resilient Florida program to provide more than $2 billion in projects over the next 4 years. I think that'll make a huge impact when you're talking about building infrastructure and promoting resiliency. We also want to use some of the resources to support our National Guard operations. Now, they've been providing emergency response efforts in unprecedented volumes throughout the pandemic, responding to natural disasters, which of course we've had some, as well as potential civil unrest, and we may have more of that, and they will be ready for that. Our National Guard have been activated for over a year in a variety of different ways, and as our population continues to grow and emergency response needs becomes more frequent, it is essential to continue to grow the number of service members available for response efforts. So in order to recruit new service members, we're recommending $41.7 million to the Florida National Guard, primarily in the form of capital investment, the Immokalee Armory, as well as an increase over and above my budget to fund the backlog of maintenance projects at existing armories. As you have more facilities and more space, you then have the ability to get more service members. So we think this could open up to get us another 450 service members, which we think would be really, really good. We also want to dedicate $1 billion to establish a new fund, the Emergency Management Response Fund. The fund will eliminate the need to seek general revenue funding to respond to ongoing pandemic emergency as well as future emergencies. The newly established fund will add an additional layer of reserve to the state's overall fiscal outlook. And so what will happen is if there's a hurricane, you incur expenses, you pay out of that fund, and then FEMA would reimburse to that fund. Ideally, we would never have to touch general revenue again to respond to natural disasters if we're able to establish this fund right now. During the pandemic, many programs across state government experienced decline in revenues, and our transportation work program also got hit. As a result of this revenue impact, DOT delayed and deferred certain programs due to the change in revenues over the last year. I'm recommending that we provide an additional $938.4 million to fund the DOT work program for a total of $10.4 billion. This funding returns the work program to pre-pandemic estimates for the fiscal year and enables projects that were deferred or delayed to be brought back in line, getting money out the door and putting people to work. We're also looking at ways to be able to expand workforce training and research. It's my goal to ensure that Floridians are prepared to fill high-demand, high-wage occupations, particularly occupations that require traditional skilled labor. And so we have two different proposals to help move us closer to our goal. First, we're recommending $60 million for the Workforce Development Capitalization Grant Program. These grants will help our school district technical centers and Florida college system institutions focus on high-performing, high-demand workforce development programs. Public technical centers and colleges will compete for grant funds, which may be used to purchase instructional equipment, lab equipment, supplies, and other non-recurring costs associated with creating or expanding workforce development programs. The State Board of Ed will prioritize grant awards on programs that train people to enter high-skill, high-wage occupations identified by the Department of Education in consultation with the Department of Economic Opportunity. Second, we're also recommending $125 million toward the creation of a new program within DOE to stimulate educational responses to employer-driven training needs. So the Florida Leads in Education and Employment Training Grant Program, FLEET, will provide work-based learning opportunities for students to engage in on-the-job training while earning meaningful credentials. And the goal is to do this apart from federal apprenticeship restrictions or regulations. This be our baby, that we go forward, looking to get young people into the workforce in pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship type programs. And I think that that's something that we have had some momentum on. I think this can continue to move that forward. Florida is also home to nearly 5.5 million residents age 60 and older, all of whom now are eligible for COVID-19 vaccines. And I've been able to speak to a number of people just traveling around the state who are 60, 64, who are getting shots. So we appreciate that, and we want to continue offering that. We've done millions and millions of seniors by now, which is really, really exciting, and we want to continue to do that. We put seniors first because seniors were the most at risk for COVID complications. We obviously did a lot with nursing homes because they were the most vulnerable of our entire population. But I think what this showed, when you have people that had to social distance or isolate, who are elderly, particularly people that have dementia or Alzheimer's, who need to have those caretakers there, it really, really did, I think, a huge psychological and emotional toll on a lot of people. Now, we are somebody, because of our vulnerability and the prevalence of dementia and Alzheimer's here in Florida, it's been something that my administration has been working on. We believe that this is an opportunity to support additional advancement in Alzheimer's research, and so we're recommending an additional $10 million for the Ed and Ethel Moore Alzheimer's Disease Research Program. Funding will be used for the prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and cure of Alzheimer's disease. In addition to the $5 million included in my Florida Leads budget recommendation, this will bring the total funds to $15 million to this important research initiative, and I think that this is very appropriate under the circumstances. So the total of the proposals and my recommendations total $4.1 billion. That's about $6 billion that we're leaving up to the legislative discretion. Now, we would like to have a portion of that $6 billion set aside for potential augmentation of our budget stabilization fund. If we put $1.7 billion in that, that would double the fund. But there are a lot of rules and restrictions, and we're going to wait for the guidance to come out about how you use the money. And part of what is going to be determined is what was your revenue loss. The way they're calculating the revenue loss, we're not sure how much Florida would qualify or not. We're going to be going through those numbers. We're going to have to look at the guidance that comes out, which should probably take a couple more weeks, and then look to also see what the disbursement schedule is for this. It's not likely all going to be dispersed within the next 4 or 5 weeks. It's probably going to be half, and then half at the discretion of the secretary over the remaining balance of the year. So I've spoken with both Chris and Wilton about, okay, functionally, how do you do that? Because we can sit here and do a supplemental budget. We don't know when exactly we're going to get the money. So we're going to be working together on that to figure out what the appropriate vehicle is. But I think all in all, we're in a strong position because of the choices that we've made over the past year. And I think that the proposals that I've outlined today really do address important issues for the state in terms of roads, in terms of seaports, in terms of education, in terms of resiliency, that I think most folks will have no problem getting behind. So all in all, it's we're getting the short end of the stick. Make no mistake about it. But we'll make the best of what we have, and I think we'll be able to get a lot done for the people of Florida. Yes, sir. No, I don't think it's that. I think it's the question is the way Congress did this bill specifically was written to benefit blue states that have really high unemployment over the last quarter of 2020. So, I mean, you guys remember in March, I mean, our theme parks started closing. Like, we didn't close them, they closed. People were getting thrown. It was a really, really traumatic time, particularly for folks who were put in that situation. They didn't look at it on that time. What they did is they really looked at it and said, okay, we're going to benefit the states that locked down the longest, and I would argue the most ineffectively, by looking at that last quarter of 2020. Well, you know what? We've been open. We're putting people back to work. I think we're doing the responsible thing, but we then get deducted as a result of that. The higher unemployment gets plussed up. And we're not going to know exactly how all this money is going to be able to be spent until we get that. But I would imagine the regulations will be written in ways that a state like Florida, if we wanted to put most of it away for a rainy day, we're probably not going to be allowed to do that. Yes, sir.
So Senator Scott sent a letter to all the governors, and he said basically you should only spend the money on COVID-related expenses, and you should return the rest of the money to the federal government. And I wanted to get your thought on whether or not, it doesn't sound like that's going to be something you're going to be doing.
So if you read the bill, they actually address what happens if you send the money back. If you send the money back, Janet Yellen, Secretary of Treasury, is allowed to apportion it to other states. So if Florida were to send the money back, Yellen is going to send it to Illinois, California, New York, or New Jersey. I don't think that would make sense for Floridians, for us to be giving even more money to the blue states that are already getting such a big windfall in this bill. And so it doesn't make any sense to do that.
Say on the resilient Florida idea, now you want to double the overall price.
Yep.
Does that mean you're still going ahead with the idea that you want $1 billion in bonding it for?
Yes, I think so, because the money's cheap. We have more than $1 billion in needs for projects. So we will, if we do this proposal, we'll have $1 billion now. The $1 billion in my budget will take, obviously over the next 4 years, so it'll be $2 billion over that 4-year period. That's a pretty significant, I think, amount of money to be able to address a lot of infrastructure needs as it relates to things like flooding and sea level rise. So we think it's a good opportunity to be able to make even more headway, and we're taking advantage of that. Well, we have, I mean, if you look, these stimulus bills that have come out, I mean, we put $250 million in from our initial CARES Act that I directed. And then in the most recent stimulus, there were tens of billions, right, for rent relief. So I think that there's money there for that. And And I think some of it even, they're going to be paying some of the landlords, like the people that own the apartments who haven't been getting paid. I think they're going to do a lot of relief for that. I know there's folks who haven't done it. So I think that that's being addressed. But, there's $6 billion that we didn't touch. And so if there's a need to be able to fill any types of gaps or any types of holes, we're always willing to look at it. But I really think the job training, the infrastructure, some of the things with the first responders and National Guard, I think those are going to be really, really value added, and I think will make a big difference.
And Governor, you said $1,000 for first responders. They've been on the front lines, and also you mentioned, mental health. That's really big among first responders, especially paramedics. I wonder, where did the 1,000 figure come from?
Well, we were looking to see what would make sense in terms of the amount of money. Obviously, I wanted to show some collaboration with the legislature by saying I'm not recommending 100% of it. We want you guys to weigh in. So it's a good chunk of money. If they want to do more, I'd be happy to do more. But we do think it's appropriate. I think if you look at what they've had to deal with, obviously the EMTs have been a difficult situation, particularly in those early days where a lot of people didn't know really what was going on with a lot of this stuff. The police have had, what they've had to do, what they had to deal with over the summer, some of the heat that they've taken, I think, very unfairly. So they've done a lot. They've been through a lot, and I think it's appropriate to be able to do it.
I bet you missed what you had said about is there anything in your recommended package for the healthcare industry, behavioral health, anything in regards to the hospitals, medical care providers that?
So we're doing the mental health, behavioral health. The hospitals, they've gotten, how much have they gotten, would you say?
There's a large amount that provide to you.
Yeah. So there have been a lot of money for that. But again, these are $4.1 billion that we're recommending for the legislature. We're giving them probably about $6 billion that I'm not necessarily putting the thumb on the scale right now. Now, if they start doing things that I think are getting outside of what's reasonable, we'll obviously throw a penalty flag at that point and let them know. But my sense is that Chris and Wilton probably have pretty similar views on some of the things that we're able to do with this. So Chris is going to be here to answer any more in-depth questions that you guys may have about our proposal. I think we do have a fact sheet or something that we'll disseminate without a problem. Thank you.
One more about your congressional days. Do you have a member of Congress on the
They hunkered down to fight this virus, and to be standing in the position that we are in today in our state, continuing to protect lives and livelihoods, and focusing on the people that are in this chart that show that 77% of our fatalities have come from those over 65 years of age. I'm very proud of what this hard-working team has done, and certainly Dr. Toomey's work and many, many other people that you never see at a press conference or on, any television camera, but the people that are out there in our public health departments, our hospitals, our nurses, our educators, people that are delivering meals on school buses, our National Guardsmen who have been volunteering for over probably close to a year now in our food banks when it wasn't even safe to have normal volunteers be in there. There is so much heroic work that has gone on. It makes me damn proud to be a Georgian.
Hi, Governor. Regarding the data glitch that you mentioned,